Yeah.
All righty.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Amen.
Amen.
Beautiful.
Amen. Good
Brother.
job.
Thank
Good
you.
job,
I
brother.
always forget to say amen.
No, that's okay. We only say it because you said it. Let's see. Who do we got here? We got everybody here. Oh, good. David's here. David, I hope you got some stuff to add here on the religion part of it.
I will attempt to control myself. Yes.
Oh, no. I hope you do. I hope you do. Of all of it, that is where I am. Free speech is where I'm probably the strongest here. So with that said,
Yours.
there we go. So does anybody have questions about the Bill of Rights? What we talked about last week, just in general? Nothing? Everybody good? All right. So I don't know how far we're going to get through this, through the First Amendment. Maybe we'll finish it all. Maybe not.
A N are my initials, right?
Let's get going.
Can
So we're going to get into the First Amendment today. And if you guys all have your constitutions there, we'll start it off with reading it. So what does the First Amendment say? Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. So it's only 45 words, but these 45 words are unbelievably fought out in the courts. And I'm going to go over a couple of the case law, but God, man, we'd be here for another year if we went through everything where the courts were interpreting the First Amendment. So we're going to go over what it says, what it means at its face, and then we'll go over a few of the exceptions, especially that are covered by case law, because there are some exceptions. It's not just the Wild West out there with free speech. So first, the first part of it was establishment of religion free exercise. What that is Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. So what does that mean? In a nutshell, so it establishes two things here. It gives the people's right, the right to believe in what they want, or establishes that right. It doesn't give them the right, right? The Constitution, the government does not grant rights. The Constitution does not grant rights. These are all rights that we've already been given. The Constitution just clears up for the government what those rights are. So it enforces the right to believe whatever you want. It's free exercise to worship however you see fit in public or in private. And that covers clothing, right? Headscarves. It covers praying to the flying spaghetti monster, which is a real thing, right? The Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster, you guys have probably heard of. But it also extends to choosing not to believe. The government cannot force you to believe in a God. Not only can they dictate who you must pray to, but it protects your right to believe in what you want to believe. And the government just can't get involved in that. Now, what it does is restrains the government from establishing religion, right? They can't create a church, a national church, any church. They can't endorse a religion or favor any belief over another. And that's where all of their problems come in. Well, you know, as we go through this stuff too, keep in mind the lockdowns that are going on now. There's a whole lot of First Amendment issues when it comes to these lockdowns that the government is trying to pull. And we'll get into that, but here in a minute. But the First Amendment does not just apply to the federal government, right? It applies to state governments. It applies to local governments. Any government at all in this country is going to be governed by this. So when the state comes out and tells you that you can't go to church because of a virus, and I went through the First Amendment, I've been through the Constitution, and actually if you go into the Constitution and search the word virus, it comes up with 0 results. So I don't know. I don't think a virus is going to be good enough reason for the government to
Well,
pull back on the Constitution. What's that?
so if you think about it, don't you think that when there's a bad virus, if you're a person of faith, that you would want to be at church?
Well, you'd think, huh? But the government says no. The government says no, that
Right.
you can riot and not get it. But apparently if you go and pray to whatever God you believe in, you're going to get the deadliest virus known to man. So,
Okay.
but a lot of the churches have fought that, and they actually won.
Mhm.
They won the right to get back to worshiping.
Right.
So, and I just don't see where the health department has a right to go against the Constitution here. Which is why it's important to remember
Would
when
it-
we're talking about these things, that
Could it fall under national defense kind of type thing? Would that be something that they're saying that, I don't know, I'm trying to come up,
Well, and I don't know what the government's position is on this, why they think they have the right to
Yeah.
stop people from praying.
If it's a national defense issue, it would be the same issue in a grocery store or,
Yeah.
any
Right.
place where somebody works. So that's
Mhm.
not the issue.
Yeah. I know, I'm trying to find justification. I'm
Kind of play devil's
figure it out,
advocate.
but yes, that's me, I try.
Well,
Question then, oh, go
the
ahead.
problem is that we've talked about this before, right? Your mind doesn't work that way.
Mhm.
We're all freedom-minded people here. And I think it's going to be pretty hard to come up with a justification. I had a problem with this from the start. And, I actually, during my trolling today, left a comment on one of the news sites that said, look, man, somebody had thanked the governor for the lockdowns and keeping us safe. Oh, because he vetoed in Ohio, the governor
Yes,
vetoed today a measure that was going to limit what he can do when it comes to the lockdowns.
right.
Of course, he vetoed it because, tyranny always leads to tyranny. But somebody said, "Oh, thank you, Governor. Thank you for keeping us safe. We appreciate it." And I said, you're allowed to. You can keep your own self safe, right? You don't need the nanny state telling you whether it's safe to go out or whether it's safe to go pray or whether it's, we've never had this before. In all the viruses that have ever come through, we don't have it during the flu season. We don't have it.
We didn't have it for N1H1.
No, we've never had it.
No.
It's bizarre.
Ebola, we didn't have it for Ebola. So
Those
Brett
were
had his
election
hand raised.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm on Prezi, so I can't see any of that. So you're
Yeah,
gonna-
I'm watching for you, so,
Yeah, those weren't election years, first off, so there's that.
okay.
But more importantly, so the rationale that I had heard that allowed them to restrict church was essentially like a blanket government health protocol type, and I don't remember the exact thing, but where they started getting really, really messed up on it is it wasn't blanket. They were being very specific and targeted. And I think the biggest case that I heard
New York.
that was so clear to me was in Nevada,
Oh, Nevada.
where they allowed casinos to be at 50% occupancy,
Oh.
but
Mm.
churches were 50 people total. So
Well,
Yeah,
and then you had people, you had de Blasio, right? Mayor of New York.
Yeah.
Actually came out threatening the Jews, told the Jews that if they got together to worship, that they were going to send the police in there to arrest them.
Yeah.
He didn't say that. He didn't say, look, if anybody gets together, this is what's going to happen. He actually singled out the Jewish faith, which is just unbelievable to me that we allow this to happen. But yeah, casinos. But you know what? Do the churches pay taxes?
Hmm.
No, right? The casinos do. They pay a whole lot of
Mhm.
taxes, right? So they're going to make sure they stay open. Churches don't pay $1 in taxes.
The liquor stores.
Well, that was a health. They said that was a health issue, right? That
Yes.
people could die from withdrawal from alcohol,
Yes.
which is true. But come on,
In
we're gonna-
Pennsylvania, your sister still can't go to a bar and order a beer. Right. And for a while they were restricted on even going to the liquor store in Pennsylvania. So,
no, they were all coming over to Ohio to buy our
Yep.
liquor.
oh, it was bad.
It's like the old bootlegging days. So,
So the other question that I had, they say it restrains the government from establishing religion. So much of our foundation was on a belief in God
sure.
in general.
Yeah,
So
we're gonna,
I'm
In
going to
God we
assume,
trust.
right. I'm going to assume that they're saying and establish a specific religion that we are still founded on a faith in something, some greater being. But I just they weren't, were they endorsing a religion by saying in God we trust, even though they say we aren't?
Well, maybe it was like the
where I
Masons.
Hmm?
The Masons say you have to believe in a God. They just don't tell you which God.
Yeah.
I think the
um,
big
Well, and-
problem that they were trying to prevent was the
Was-
Church of England,
Right.
Yes.
where you have an official religion that
Yeah.
is wed directly to the monarchy, to the ruling
Correct.
class. And so you have a rather unholy marriage, if you will, between ruling and religion. And
Correct.
Right.
that in particular would be the number one reason to keep the government from establishing any religion. And I agree with that.
Right.
And I don't remember what year it was. It was early on. And the Pope had come to the new government here and had actually wanted them to appoint a, boy, I wish, I'm looking for it right now and I don't remember where it is. But wanted them to, I believe like
An emissary?
national, like a national archbishop. And the founders told the Pope, look, we don't have the authority to do that. You know what? You can do it. You can do it as the Catholic Church, but we
Right.
don't have the authority to appoint anybody for one religion over this country.
Right. He went to the wrong people.
Yeah. So we've got two hands. Daniela was first and then Stephanie next. So Daniela, you have a comment, question, or?
Oh, thank you.
Mhm.
To the In God We Trust, and that wasn't added until the Eisenhower administration in 1957 to our coinage and our dollars. And then the Pledge of Allegiance used to be one nation indivisible, not one nation under God. At that time, they changed that as well. So the absence of the word God was never said to be a law or anything like that. Jefferson just wrote about it in a letter and strongly pushed for it, and they kept it out for that reason. So it wasn't until that stuff was added. So that's my 2 cents.
Oh, okay.
And that is true. Now, one of the things you'll always hear is that we were founded as a Christian nation, right? And that's not necessarily true. We were religious, and not all of them were. We had anti-theists that were there. But we were not founded necessarily as a Christian nation as much as a nation that believed in God. And one of the places that you are going to see that, well, there's plenty of places to see it. If you look at Washington's inaugural address, his first farewell address, you'll see how much he talks about God. But nothing in the First Amendment prohibits government from taking an interest in religion, right? It prohibits them from saying, we can't, from having government say, this is the religion that you have to subscribe to. This is the national religion. But nothing stops him from taking an interest in religion. And that popped up big in the Northwest Ordinance in 1787.
Can I touch back to it? Can I circle back to Stephanie real quick?
Yeah, as long as you don't ever say circle back again.
I hadn't decided.
No, ever.
I will. So Stephanie, did you have a question or was it
Yeah,
answered?
Stephanie, sorry,
No.
go ahead.
Okay, so back to this, like the religion with the churches and whether or not that we think that the government had the right to close a church or not close a church. I didn't have a problem when this whole thing started where they're like, okay, we're, closing things down for the better sake of everybody. It's not just the people there. And I mean, I guess I looked at it as they weren't infringing on my rights to go to church. because there was other ways I could still do it. They couldn't stop us virtually. They couldn't stop us, from talking on phones and doing things like in Zooms and whatnot. But I guess I looked at it that they were looking out for the general welfare of the entire country and not just that. So is that like,
I think the problem is, and like Brad pointed out, that it wasn't they lose that argument when they allow, when they allowed Home Depots to stay open without regulation. Early on, if you remember, there was no mask requirement. There was no, I mean, I would go to Home Depot, I would go to Walmart, and they were
Correct.
packed in there like sardines,
correct?
Yeah.
right? They got the
But
casinos
even
are
in the beginning,
open.
though, in the beginning, when everything was like, in the very beginning, when probably in April, not maybe necessarily the first week or so, but when they finally closed everything down, like it literally driving to work, it was like a ghost town. There was really nobody out doing
Well-
anywhere or going anywhere or doing anything. And I was like, okay, I understand we're trying to do things, but at the same time, I guess part of me, I think some people hide behind the religious thing that says, well, you can't tell me what to do. And even going to church, I would sit in church and it was like, okay, so there's a mask mandate that if you're going to be congregating and whatnot, that people had to wear, they asked that people wear masks, but people would, even kids, like associates of my daughters would walk in and they would say, my daughter would be like, you don't have to wear a mask. And they're like, no, it's my religious freedom. You can't tell me, they can't tell me what to do. And I'm
Yeah,
like,
and that's ridiculous.
I'm just like, even as in any religion, you'd think that you'd want to make sure that you're not,
Harming others.
yeah.
Mhm.
Like,
You
I
know,
guess I
people-
looked at it like not necessarily taking away my rights, but the fact that I'm not being self-centered and I'm trying to think
Mhm.
of other people along with that. And so it's like, I mean, in that thinking though, am I giving up my First Amendment right and saying, okay, well, I'm giving up my freedom of religion then? Or is it just the fact that I'm still
Well,
keeping,
And if you're
It's-
if you're concerned for others, you can always still choose to not go.
Or you could,
well,
yeah,
I
right.
would go and I'd sit there and I'd put my mask on. I leave it on. I even still to this
Great.
day, I walk in and I do it, but and I'm vaccinated. I've got everything done. I've been vaccinated since January, but I guess I just look at, I'm just trying to I would hate to be responsible for somebody else's.
Sure. But now,
That's just
but the
me.
problem is that you don't want to be responsible for somebody else getting sick. So you're
Correct.
doing the right things, right? You're doing what you're supposed to do. But the problem is that when the government comes in and tells you what you can and can't do in contradiction to, I mean, we're not talking about just religion, peaceably assembling, right? They were shutting down rallies, saying that, well, they were trying to, conservative rallies, Donald Trump's rallies, things like that. But I mean, but the riots, those were okay, right? Nobody said anything about that. There was no mask mandate with that. The problem is that it was not across the board, like Brad said before.
Right.
If it was across the board,
I see your hand,
everybody
Brad.
followed the same rule, then I guess I would have no problem with it, but it wasn't.
Okay,
Right.
let Brad, I think Brad jumped in and then Kathy and Aunt Becky.
Yeah, so I think the issue here is with the government giving the approval on what is an essential thing. What was essential? So they said this is essential and this is essential and this is essential. But religion, you're not essential. We're going to put all these restrictions on you, and that is where I think the contradictory portion comes in with the First Amendment, is because you cannot do any law that restricts that. And they went through and they said, this is good, but religion is no. And that's where that restriction comes in, is the government deciding what is essential. And I promise you, there is nothing the government's going to tell me that's going to say that their rules are more essential than my faith.
Well, and right. I mean, now the way they got around it is by not passing an actual law, I guess, right? I
Mhm.
mean, that was always the thing. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. So,
Did Kathy or Aunt Becky have something to say before we move on?
I changed my mind because mine's
Okay.
gonna be more of a political thing than to do with this, so.
Okay.
Well, and that's okay. What we don't do is party here. You know,
I'm not partying,
we're
but-
not gonna bash
just-
the other party, but we've said all along that, I mean, you have to talk about politics when you're talking about the Constitution. You have to.
I just think that there's policy and
because-
rules and even laws made, and I think you'll agree with me, Jim, that are near impossible to enforce. And I just want to give this one example with, you can have a policy to put your mask on or not put your mask on, or even make it a damn law. I work in the hospitality business. We have a country club, hotel, resort, as you know, Jim. The other day, we had a family of 3, a mother, father, and a teenager. They walked in and my supervisor walked up to them and said, "Excuse, we have masks. We've got the paper mask," and we give them the mask. Said, "Excuse me, you need to put a mask on." And they said, "Oh no, we have a doctor's excuse." And he said, "The whole family?" And he goes, "Yes, our whole family has a doctor's excuse." And it stops there. You can't even ask, "Well, do you have your doctor?" Whatever. You cannot question it. Just like with what do you call the service dogs? Somebody brings a Chihuahua in or a Shih Tzu, and all of a sudden they've been coming to us for years, but all of a sudden they're a service dog, and we can't question that. So I mean, there's ways to get around laws and stuff. Laws are
Well,
stupid.
then the law came back and the establishments created their own policies where they made accommodations for those who, so if you go to Giant Eagle, you say, "I have a medical exemption to wear a mask." They say, "Okay, wait out in your car and we'll bring it out to you." Their policy is you're not allowed in their business. And that's a,
And they're not denying you business.
right. They're not denying it. And
Well,
that's,
I
that's
work in
the
a
empl-
hospital and they do not, there is no such thing as a medical exemption. You can't
Mhm.
come in, if you have a doctor's appointment, you have to put a mask on. They will not even allow you to wear a cloth mask. They substitute it with a surgical mask. But there is, one lady walked in and said, "I have a exemption from my doctor. Here it is." And they're like, "Great, you can wait until it's time when when it's lifted, because there is no such thing as a medical exemption. Everybody can put a mask on for a short period of time to do that." So even that, they've now proven that there isn't, people thought, well, if I get a letter, then I'm exempt. But even physically being in a hospital setting, there is no such thing as a medical exemption
Mhm.
from our point of view, and they will not let you in the front door.
And Stephanie, I'm with you, but, as an establishment, maybe a hospital can, because you're obviously in a medical facility. They're saying you're nuts, but a hotel can't do that. You know what I'm saying? I don't even know if we could say, well, it's either a mask or don't stay with us.
We
You
can
know
just
what I
tell you
mean?
to go to the 5th floor, 5 West.
We
That's
only
the
have
psych
2
ward.
floors.
All right. Well, I'm going to move on because we're getting
Yep.
off a little bit here with the mask.
Yes.
Um,
Kathy, did you have something to say? You still had your hand up.
No, I wanted to comment on what Stephanie said earlier about the religious issue. We are blessed or cursed, depends on the day, that we now have, Zoom and other ways of connecting with people. But so the fact that we could, do a Zoom church thing really isn't the point. The point is we never should have been prevented from exercising our religion the
Mhm.
way we normally do. And had it been 25 years ago, we wouldn't even be having this discussion, right? We would be saying
Right.
either I'm going or you can't stop me from
Well,
going.
one of the things I wanted to bring up and I forgot that turns me on this thing is, you remember there was that police department, I don't remember what state, but they went around and started citing people who showed up for a service in their own cars. It was a thing where
Yes.
all the cars pulled in, nobody got out of their car.
Yep.
Everybody was in their car, and these police officers went around citing people for violating the government's mandates for showing up for church. Well, if
Yep.
it's truly about safety, how is sitting in your car with your family going to be unsafe to the people that are next to you in a car? These people weren't getting out of their cars. So
That's right.
So Kathy,
Yeah.
are you saying though that the government didn't have a right to tell you couldn't go to church and you were going to church just to prove a point? Or are you saying that you were
No,
just
I'm
going to go to
saying that-
church because you want, because you, you didn't care. I mean, I'm not trying to be argumentative, please. I'm not that type of person.
No.
I'm trying to understand.
No, I'm saying that the government didn't have a right to say that we couldn't go to church.
Even if it's in the general welfare of everybody and there's other ways that I understand getting together with a group of people is a lot easier because you're developing fellowship. Just like I'm sure this group, if it ever got together, would be a different dynamic because you're actually in the same room talking with people. I'm not disputing that at all, but I'm
Right.
just questioning whether or not I'm going to church because I have the right and by God, you can't tell me that I can't, or is it that it's like, well, those rules don't apply to me.
I'm going to church because it's my right. It's a
Right,
God-given
but even
right.
even in a pandemic, when
I-
you're looking at the welfare of everybody else, like
You know,
of the general
Everybody is
population.
responsible.
Here's-
Stephanie, here's my thing. You're responsible for your own welfare. I'm not responsible for your welfare, and you're not responsible for mine. So if I want to go to church, it is my right to do so. If you don't want to go, by all means, stay home.
Oh, I don't disagree with that either. I don't
So
disagree with that.
that's where I'm
So
coming from. It's my
one of
right.
So Stephanie, when you said, is it just to prove a point? Well, there comes a point where we need to go out and prove a point, right? And one of my favorite quotes, and you guys have all probably heard it, is those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. And it's from Ben Franklin. And it's right on the head. To give up your liberty under the guise of safety, that's a slippery slope, man.
And at what point does it stop at a mask? It's not going to stop at a mask.
And at what point now, I mean, you know how the government is. The government will they don't give back a lot of stuff. Once they get something,
I agree.
it's hard fought to get it back. And I think that there comes a point where, not just with this, there's a lot of things going on right now where points need to be made. Yes, I'm doing something just to prove a point. Absolutely. And I think that people in this country need to wake up and know what our rights are. And there are times when they're going to need to just prove a point and just say enough is enough. We're not doing this anymore.
And it's a little bit of virtue signaling by saying, well, you don't want to help out everybody else.
Right. Yeah. If you don't,
I mean, hey, if you feel in danger being out in public, then don't
Stay
be out in
home.
public. Yeah.
Yeah. Stay home.
That is your right. You can stay home.
All right. So let me move on here. So we were talking about that we weren't founded as a Christian nation, but God was a big part of it. So the Northwest Ordinance of 1787, that was basically when we were moving westward. And this was an ordinance that dictated how the new states were going to come to being out west. It was to stop the states from all the fighting and seizing of land and whatnot. But one of the things that they said in there is taken right out of it, is that religion, morality, and knowledge being necessary to good government and the happiness of mankind, schools and the means of education shall forever be encouraged. So while they were not ever saying, look, you need to be a Christian, the church that they were trying, oh man, I just had it here. The one they were trying to avoid in England, is it England?
The Church of England?
Yeah, the Church of England.
Anglican Church.
Church of England?
Yeah, but I think it was
It was the Anglican.
you're right. It was the Anglican. Yep. The Anglican Church is the one that they were trying. They thought that was going to be the biggest threat to free exercise. So they're not ever coming in saying this is the religion you need to believe. What they're saying is that, look, religion, morality, and knowledge being necessary to good government and happiness of mankind, schools, and the means of education shall forever be encouraged. They're saying, look, we are going to always encourage religion. We don't care what you're going to believe in, but there needs to be religion. And I am not a religious person. You guys know that about me, but there is a marked decline in society since society has gotten away from the church. I believe that. It's my girls all went to Sunday school. They were raised in the church until they were old enough to make their own decisions, but it's a good place to raise a family. I mean, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal. These are all, every one of the commandments is a good way to live your life. So I'm all about it. I'm all about the government encouraging religion, but you're not allowed to force it on me. You're not allowed to force it on anybody, and you're not allowed to set up your own religion and tell people they have to go to that. So that's my 2 cents. So before we move on here from religion, anybody else? David, you have anything?
Not really. I think it's been good so far. Yep.
Anybody else on religion? Okay, so moving on. So we go into freedom of speech and the press. And this is a little bit of something. Nothing makes me tear my hair out when I'm online reading these comments from people like freedom of speech. So first, what it says is, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press. Pretty simple, straightforward, right? There are more court cases governing freedom of speech than I would think, if not more than anything else, probably close. Freedom of speech is certainly a hot topic. So it's one of the most misunderstood. First off, freedom of speech restricts the government's actions on your speech. That's it, right? Private employers and citizens are under no restriction at all. As with most of the Bill of Rights, the First Amendment applies to all governments, right? All the way down to your local governments. You don't have a right to free speech on Facebook. You don't have a right to free speech in Walmart when you're in there screaming and yelling about whatever it is you're screaming and yelling about, and Walmart tells you to leave, right? You don't have a right to free speech when you're on Facebook and you make a comment and you get attacked by a whole bunch of people that don't agree with you. You can't yell free speech. It's my free speech. Well, okay. You know what? Nobody's restricting your free speech, but there's consequences to your speech, right? All the First Amendment covers is the government suppressing your free speech. That's it. That's it. Your employer does not have to abide by your right to free speech. If you start running off the mouth on work hours, talking bad about your employer, talking bad, spewing hate speech during work hours, you're going to be fired. And you have no First Amendment protections there. None. Now, if the government were to come down and say, hey, look, we don't like what you're saying out here in the public square, you know what? You can't be saying what you're saying about purple people. Can't do it. Now you have a legitimate bitch. You have a gripe. But when your employer or when a store or your neighbor, it is impossible for them to infringe on your right to free speech.
Okay, Brad has his hand up.
Brad?
A comment too.
So with that, right? So the foundational role of our government is to protect our inalienable rights, right? Like that's the foundation. So what's your take, or I think I kind of get your take from other conversations, but when private companies like Facebook, Twitter, Amazon get so large that they restrict our free speech.
Yeah, we've talked about this before. Personally, I think that there's going to be some court rulings coming down eventually that, big tech like that is going to have some First Amendment issues where the First Amendment will apply on there, right? Because that is where Facebook and Twitter right now are where the world communicates. That's it. I mean, everybody goes there to communicate. And when you have them suppressing the speech of one group over another, I think they're going to have big problems with that. When I said Facebook, I meant more like, in the comments section, right? Or, when if like even here on the Everyday Constitution page, right? If you put a comment on there that's shitty, or I just think it's shitty and I delete it, that's it. I mean, this is my page. There's no right to free speech here. I'm allowed to censor whatever I want to censor for the goodwill of the page. Now, government's different, right? Even the PD page, we do not delete comments. No, we will hide them, Well, although now we do, we can delete them off the page now because we have a company that is constantly archiving all of our stuff. So if there's always a record of it, right? But you can't, and this is why politicians can't delete people that are on there calling them traitors, because they're in the government and they cannot stifle your speech. But when you're commenting on a public, on a private page on Facebook, there's no expectation. Now, when you're talking about the company as a whole, I think they're going to have problems. I really do.
And
Maybe
that was kind of my comment, is that they've become such almost a piece of infrastructure now, almost like the phone company, where they'll have to start being regulated, I think, because it has become a place of advertising, a place of, just people are it's so ingrained and it's so much a part of your life. I tried to get rid of Facebook, and another friend tried to get rid of Facebook, and they're like, I couldn't do it because that's where I got my news from, information from. I communicated with my family there, and it's become almost a necessary platform. It's like I said, it's so ingrained.
And I think even more scary to me than Facebook, and I think Facebook and Twitter are certainly gonna have to face the
Amazon
music, but these sites like Amazon, they're hosting and are able to just kick off who they don't want, because I get a lot of my news from the Daily Wire, right?
Yep.
Now, they are very conservative, and it has a very, very conservative slant to the news, but there's no fake news, right? Their opinion pieces are conservative, but just because Amazon doesn't agree with them and they have the right to kick them off their platform, and they haven't, but obviously Parler they did. But their argument with Parler was ridiculous to me, is that, there's so much hate speech on there. And I'm like, whoa.
Yeah, it was.
Let's go on Facebook and let's go on some of the more liberal pages where they're talking about the police. And I mean, you want to talk about, the hate that is being spewed there, but nothing's being done.
Right.
But now you're going to shut down Parler because they're talking about, taking the government back, or, whatnot. So I think there's going to be big problems there. So what is protected?
I was going to say Daniela had a comment, and Kathy. So I know we've got a lot to talk about tonight. So we might get behind, but
no, we're definitely going to be
good. It's good. It's good stuff we're talking about. So Daniela, did you?
Yeah, I have two questions. The first on Facebook and private businesses, mom and pop shops. Is the difference between them allowing to set these rules that may be considered against discrimination laws, that they're private businesses versus publicly traded businesses, as in the business is owned by the public and their stocks, and then they have anti-discrimination laws. And if they're not publicly traded, then they can get away with doing what they feel they can do. And then my second question was, Jim, for you as a LEO, with the free speech fighting words doctrine, which I sent you the question on Facebook, like when I was training for law enforcement, that was something that came up a lot, but I never actually asked someone in law enforcement if they've felt that when somebody says words in the open general area, like you mentioned, like free speech in a general area the government cannot come down on, but the government is law enforcement. And if somebody uses fighting words in an open area, then law enforcement could come down on them. So what's your take on the fighting words?
Well, and we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the exceptions here in a minute, but that's not quite true. So fighting words deals with face-to-face threats. It does not deal with generalities, right? Things that I would say to somebody face-to-face, personally, that would invoke a violent response, versus me saying those exact same things on a megaphone and just saying it out into the public air are two different things. So for the fighting words, it is face to face. And that's, I mean, those are their words. And I don't have a problem with that. I mean, there needs to be some restriction, and we'll get into the exceptions on it. I mean, there's plenty of exceptions that I don't have any problem with. It can't just be a free for all. There has to be laws. There has to be rules for a civil society. You can't just, you can't
But
just say, oh, freedom of speech, everything goes. You can't yell
But
fire
there's-
in a crowded theater. What's that?
Oh, if they're just words, why does the government get to regulate just words, even if they are a threat? They're words that are threatening violence. They are still just words.
Well, I mean, you're talking about, but you're talking about somebody being a victim then at that point, right? I mean, when you're face to face and you're saying just hateful shit to somebody that is going to end up in a violent response, it's illegal. You can't. It's illegal to everybody but the police, apparently. I mean, you can spit on me and say what you want to me, but I don't have a problem with that. They are just words, but they're words that result in violence.
Can you show me the guidelines which outline what words I'm allowed to and not allowed to say?
No, I can't. And you knew the answer to that.
I did.
I know you did. You're just
No,
trying to
because there shouldn't be, if you lie in print about something, well, yeah, that's, you're
liable.
You are right. And slander if you're lying, verbally about something. But as far as saying something to somebody, whether face to face or over text.
So
Where is the line drawn?
We'll get into the exceptions here in a minute. I'm going to get off.
Okay, I was going to say the other question that Danielle had asked about the discrimination with public versus private. From what I found here, the discrimination laws are all applied for public accommodations. So restaurants, movie theaters, gas stations, those are all protected by federal law, regardless of whether they're publicly traded or mom and pop. Retail stores, they said, are the gray area because federal courts have held that retail shopping is not a public accommodation, and browsing in a store doesn't normally invoke the right to contract provision. So it has to do with more of the services, I think, that the private company, this is from Brazos Lawyers, a law firm site. So I'm sure every case is going to be different depending on what they have, but it sounds like when there's a service to the customer, there's a contract or a sales that's an accommodating to the public, then they would be held to those federal laws.
Right. For instance, with a restaurant, when you walk in, the expectation is that you're going to buy something. I mean, how often do you walk into a restaurant and say, I'm just browsing, I'm just looking, I might not actually purchase anything. And so the expectation there is that you're open to serve anybody that might come in.
Yes.
So then there would be a reasonable expectation that anybody that comes in would get served and you wouldn't get to pick,
Okay. And then Kathy, did you have a comment before?
Yeah, I wanted to go back to what we were talking about earlier about the, like the Facebook and the Twitter platforms. I mean, I believe in this past election cycle that they jumped the shark and they became almost in-kind contributors to one political party over another. And so
I don't think it was in kind. I think they were direct contributors, but go ahead.
Well, okay. Yeah, that too. So at this point, I see the government connected with them, even if it's not like in your face. They are speaking on behalf of the government at this point.
They're lobbyists.
And they are suppressing speech because the people that don't agree with them are not being heard. They've been shut down.
I would agree with that, Kathy, and I would also add that to the media, right? Like the media as a whole is you don't find mistakes that are in favor that like, oh darn, I mean, the left did something
Right.
wrong and we didn't report on it, like, or vice versa. I can't get the words out right now, but you know what I'm saying. I can't.
I do. I do. So I mean, I think that they don't have a leg to stand on at this point, in my opinion, to say that they are separate and apart from the government. I think they're an arm of the government
Mm,
because of their behavior.
No, yeah,
Those
know-
independent fact checkers.
they, Mark Levin just came out with a new book last year called Unfreedom of the Press, which if you haven't got it, is a pretty good read, just about how the press has turned into the propaganda arm of the Democratic Party. So, I mean, whether you believe it or you don't believe it, it's a good book.
And but the problem is, who's going to stop them? I mean, they were able to shut down at the time, the current president of the United States. I mean, that's kind of like your last line of defense, no?
Yeah, yeah. But now you see how the independent media is exploding now. And there's a quote that I'm going to get to in a minute, but that's basically, I mean, we're still a capitalist society, right? And right now they're controlling everything. But I don't know, man. I don't know what the answer is, to be honest with you, on how you're going to stop the media. The amount of money that they're getting coming in.
But part of that, I think, goes back to the Smith-Mundt Act of 1948. I had done a little bit of research on that. Before it was a National Defense Authorization Act that Obama had passed in 2012, basically reversed the Smith-Mundt Act, which prevented the government from publishing propaganda. So it kind of removed that piece. And I think that that's when we started to see more slanted or more opinionated news stories than like we used to see when we were growing up. You know, I remember everything being very black and white, and there was never an opinion
right. You never had opinion pieces. You never had people giving commentary, right?
Well, and I wouldn't even
it was
say
a 15-minute, or 5-minute block.
Well,
right.
I mean, you've got serious leaks to the press.
Yes, that's
from government, and that's what starts that whole snowball.
Right.
Well, do you think it's just a coincidence that less than 6 months after that was not signed but enforced, Sandy Hook happened?
On which?
The NDAA of 2012 that Obama
National Defense Administration Act was.
You know what? I
don't know about that, but I do recognize that there are a lot more adjectives and adverbs that are leading in stories now than I don't even want to say commentary. I want to it looks like it's fact, but just the way that it's written, you get a different sense by the actual descriptors that are used.
Right.
It has a slant.
It does.
It does.
So
the line between editorial and news story has been blurred. Once upon a time, in the newspaper or on television, they would state something is going to be an editorial, and you knew that was an opinion piece by somebody, and it was held off separately and differently and noted as such.
Yes.
And you read the editorial page for opinions, and you read the other pages for news.
Well,
Yes.
and you look at now,
that line has
and
become
it's
blurred.
not just the left. I mean, MSNBC,
Correct.
It's CNN, but it's Fox News. They're getting 4-hour blocks of nothing but opinion. Well, I mean, it's unbelievable. There's no journalism there at all. It is just nothing but, Sean Hannity will tell you he's not a journalist.
Yeah.
Sean Hannity is a talking head who gives his opinion every day.
And those opinion shows actually they start airing when people start coming home from work.
Yeah.
No, they're smart.
Facts are during the day.
So Aunt Becky had a comment, and then I think you want to move on.
Yeah, real quick. It's no different than, and everybody's talked about bait and click. I'm bad about those bait and click articles. The headline says this, and like, oh, I want to go see what that's about. And I click and they read it. You're like, What the hell? You know, it's got
Mhm.
nothing to do with that headline was about. But how many people read those damn headlines and that's all they remember?
Yeah.
They don't read the article.
Yep. Well, and that's, you know, that's one of my biggest complaints on social media is how many people, when you go to even a local news story and people, God, I don't even know. It's got to be greater than 50% on there are only commenting based on the headline, right? They're
Mhm.
not even going in to read the story. And the media knows this. So they know that they can use 15 words to sway opinion because chances are people aren't going to go read the rest. They're
Mhm.
going to read the headline, even though the headline is misleading. And then if you would read the story, you'd realize the headline's misleading, but they don't read the headline. They don't read
Right.
the story. So no, unfreedom of the press, man. So anyway, what's protected? Let's move on here. Spoken word, written word, and expression. Communism, Nazism, radical speech, sexist speech, hate speech, all protected, right? We don't need to protect peace and love, speech that everybody loves, right? What we're protecting is a speech that you don't love, that you have the right to, you have the right to say it. This is out of Gertz versus Robert Welch Incorporated, a 1974 court case. And one of the things they said is under the First Amendment, there is no such thing as a false idea. However pernicious an opinion, pernicious is evil, I had to look it up. However pernicious an opinion may seem, we depend for its correction, not on the conscience of judges and juries, but on the competition of other ideas. And that's it in a nutshell, right? And that is why they're saying, you know, that's what they're saying about communism, Nazism, radical speech, hate speech, sexist speech. Look, you have the right to say it, but what we're counting on here is the competition of other ideas, right? And that is how, so far, we've staved off socialism, right? I mean, you're allowed to get up there and you're allowed to give all your communist and your socialist ideas. But up until this point, they've been laughed off and everybody's brought other ideas to the table. But now, just with the media again and this new generation and, you know, socialist ideas are starting to take hold. And it's going to be up to us. It's not up to the government to shut them down. Obviously, the current government is not going to shut that down. But, you know, it's not up to a conservative government to shut it down.
Well, wouldn't that, the Constitution protects us against the socialistic government, doesn't it?
Sure.
So then how can we allow that to happen unless they start making amendments? I mean, honestly, that we should not be allowed to be a socialist government.
Well, I mean, I guess right now we haven't been, right? We're getting there with all the social welfare programs and everything that are going on. But right now, just like they said in Getz or in Gertz, is that, you know, it's not for the conscience of judges and juries to decide.
The competition
on other ideas, and so far that's worked.
Kathy, you had a comment?
Well, we're to the point now, though, where it's not government shutting down free speech. It's my neighbor. It's the cancel culture. It's, you know, anything I did or said 30 years ago, I'm going to lose my job over, or I could be, you know, and so that's outside of the Constitution. I understand that, but that's where we should be concerned because, you know, they're just leading the way to the socialism and the communism. The neighbors are.
And how do you stop the private sector? How do you stop, you know?
They're scared. They are so scared.
Hey, I never once had a Trump sticker on my car, anything in my front yard because I was scared. I did get to where I'd go out and wear my Trump t-shirt, but I was always in a well-crowded place, you know, like a restaurant. If I went out to eat, I'd wear it. And, but I mean, you wouldn't see me putting any kind of political affiliation on my car or in my yard. No way.
I may or may not have used a power washer on my sidewalk to further my candidate. That's all I'm saying. And it may or may not still be there.
My uncle actually felt the same way about having a Biden sign in his front yard. He would not allow, he lives in a duplex, and he stopped the lady that he shares the duplex with from putting any Biden signs in their front yard because he was afraid exactly the same way of having any of those posters in his front yard.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. I don't know. I guess these companies are all going to have to grow backbone, and it's going to take us to finally just put our foot down and say, look, this is stupid. You know what? I don't care what this guy said 20 years ago. I'm not firing him. Right? He's been a good employee for the last 20 years. He's upstanding. Yeah, okay. So he dressed in blackface for a Halloween party in college. Yeah. Should we do that today? No. Am I gonna fire the guy? Get the hell out of here. You know, but they're so afraid that they're going to be boycotted or they're going to be labeled as racist that they're just.
Or how about being afraid that you chose not to fire the guy?
Right. That's what I mean. Then then we condone it. No,
right, exactly. You know, like, nah, that's a First Amendment right. I mean, he can dress the way he wants to dress. And
look, man, as long as you're not, I mean, there's plenty, you guys, I mean, there's plenty that I post that I could never post while I'm working, or I could never say things I couldn't say when I'm working. And I know where that line is. And I would expect the city to bring sanctions upon me if I were to be out there saying the things that I say on, you know, social media or on my off time. If I were to be out there politicking and doing that kind of stuff when I'm working, I fully expect them to do something about it. But when I'm off,
you know,
go ahead.
Even though this is kind of outside the Constitution, what we're talking about, what we should expect and demand from our leaders is that they speak out against this, that they tell these woke people, neighbors of ours, that's not how we work here as a republic.
Well,
and nobody, and they're
the
not
problem.
standing up and saying a word about it.
That's the problem. A lot, you know, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, these people would have been ostracized for doing the things they're doing. But now the woke culture has scared these people. You're scared to death. You're scared to death to say anything that steps out of line in what they believe.
I
right?
know, but that's what I'm saying. That's where our elected officials need to step up and say, hey, Joe Smith down in Florida, you don't have a right to shut that person down or, you know, fire them. Yeah, it's a private employer. You have a right to fire them, but why? Why would you do that? They didn't do anything wrong as an employee. They made a mistake 30 years ago. And that's what our elected officials need to stand up and argue about, in my opinion.
But
But
then
it's
it
our
has to go on
elected
both
officials
sides.
that are allowing it. They're the ones doing it. They're the ones encouraging all
I
of
know.
this.
I know.
But then again, that's where you get into government regulating your private business. You know, if the private business owner wants to fire an employee for doing something like that, the government can't step in and say, no, you're not allowed to fire him.
I'm not saying that government should step in and say you can't do that. I'm saying our leaders should step up and say, people have opposite opinions and you need to listen to them, respect them. You don't have to agree with them, but you certainly don't cancel them because of it.
Well, you know, part of the problem too is that everybody wants to bitch on Facebook and everybody wants to come here and complain about it. But when something happens in your community or in your state, or, you know, you're close enough to do something about it, then these private businesses need to be held to account, right? If they're going to fire somebody over conservative views, then the problem is that they don't suffer financially, right? I mean, yeah, you're going to have people on the left that are going to go there and buy their product just simply because they did it. But the conservatives, we're not out there protesting. We're not out there making a big deal about this stuff. We just take it. We roll over. So the left is very good at mobilizing. They're way better than the right, for sure. They're better at organizing. You know, the right just kind of takes it and, well, okay. I mean, I guess I got fired because
So Brad has his hand up, and then Becky.
And one of the other things that's happening with the private sector right now is they're canceling themselves because they know it'll market themselves. Like the Dr. Seuss thing, like that started with them saying that these books are racist.
Yep.
And then everybody picked up on it and they sold more books than they've ever sold in their entire life.
Oh, yeah. It was
It's almost
marketing
like-
genius.
Yeah, it's almost like what we need to do. It's almost like filing like a false police report charge. Like if you're gonna come out here and like claim racism when it's clearly not racist and it's part of the times, like I wish there was some kind of standard that we could just hit these companies with in some ways, because their marketing and they're just all negative to the culture, to the country, to the fabric of America when they're doing this. But that's more of a personal opinion than necessarily a legal opinion.
And then it has to happen on both sides. So.
Oh, it'd be a deceptive marketing campaign.
Aunt Becky, did you have something else?
Well, I just, Jim said something about, our side getting together and demonstrating or doing something like the left does, but the few times that they've done that, there's been clashes because our side's not allowed to go out and gather and march down the street and without repercussions from the other side. I mean, I don't know if you guys had noticed that within the last year or two, that when they
They
go
get
out,
labeled as racists.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then it leads to a riot in the streets.
Yeah, well, this is the same thing we were talking about with the media before, where if we go out and get together and we come together as a unified group and we say, hey, we like the Second Amendment, or we think there was some weird stuff with this election, or insert any conservative cause, the media will jump down our throats and say, hey, all these racist, neo-Nazi, white supremacists gathered. And it becomes this big thing where it's not like the intent, whereas the left gets together, they gather, like Bert spend hundreds of millions of dollars in the images and stuff like that. People are shot and killed, and it's just peaceful protest. It's just,
I would like to point out, though, it is not just against conservatives. So last week I had commented on one of Sean Hannity's posts, and it was a post about a lady who was at Bank of America. They wanted her to wear a mask. She refused. The cops came, she got arrested, right? Everybody's like, oh my God, stormtroopers, you can't arrest people wearing a mask. Well, it had nothing to do with her wearing a mask. What it had to do with was that was the bank's policy. She refused to do it. They asked her to leave. She refused to leave. The cops came. Cops said, look, you either put a mask on, you got to go. And she said, I'm not going anywhere. So it turned into a trespass issue and she was arrested. Now, the media portrays it as the cops threw her on the ground. If you watch the video, they absolutely did not. She was non-compliant. So she was handcuffed and she was taken out of there. And I had defended this. I said, look, man, the business has a right. All right. If you don't like the Bank of America is going to make you wear a mask, then go withdraw all your money and take it to a bank that's not going to make you wear a mask.
Yeah, I thought
the way
your
it works. But you can't just say because you don't believe in wearing masks. I mean, these businesses have a right. I mean, what are they supposed to do then, right? For any policy. So now people are coming in, they're not wearing shirts. Oh, well, shit, can't do anything about it. They have a right to tell you to leave. Well, I got attacked by conservatives that were calling me liberal. They were calling me, God, I can't even remember what they were calling me. They were being absolutely as disgusting toward me as the liberals are towards conservatives. And obviously, I mean, you guys know me, I'm no liberal. But the things that they were saying to me, I was like, are you kidding me right now?
And that's the brilliance of how these people work, is that they've been painting cops to be bad guys and stormtroopers for so long. And now an anti-masker or a woman who didn't want to wear a mask, and they pretty much painted a negative stroke on both the things that they hate. And I mean, it's just the brilliance of how they operate.
Yeah, they've been pushing this stuff for a year, and as soon as a conservative gets fed up and goes, guys, I'm freaking tired of this. It's been BS for a year. And then it's, well,
oh, the cops should arrest her. And the anti-masker should have been arrested. Oh, but she was thrown to the ground. I mean, it's really, it's brilliant, but confusing.
Yeah.
Social media has done a great job turning us against each other.
Absolutely.
Daniela, you had a comment? Question?
Yeah, I'll find the video and post it on the Facebook page, but there's a lady that's been lobbying, and her speech to the House was quite beautiful. I'll find that video, but she's lobbying for discrimination in the workplace against political affiliation. And it is a real threat. I work at an art gallery now, which is a place that like had a huge Black Lives Matter sign in the window. And they talk every single day about how much they hate certain political things. And I have to like be quiet because I know I could possibly lose my job. And it's for real. Like they would.
And I don't have a problem with that. I don't have a problem with them telling you that you cannot talk conservative talk there.
Because
But
they
then-
would treat me
But
different
then
if
you
they knew.
can't talk liberal talk either. That's my problem.
Mhm.
And that's been my problem through this whole thing.
Anyways,
is-
I'm gonna post this video on the page because this lady is such an elegant speaker, and I hope that she's getting the recognition. And I actually don't know if anybody else knows what's going on with the results of her lobbying, but I think even if she's not successful, it is the next discrimination in the workplace that's going to be achieved. Political affiliation.
All right. All right. So listen, it is 9:10. I'm going to wrap this up now.
Oh, my.
Before we get into the exceptions, because I'm not going to be able to get through all the exceptions, it'll be another hour. So we'll pick up with the exceptions to free speech if you guys want to study up on those for next week. And that's where we'll get into the fighting words and intellectual property and child porn and but yeah, so we'll start there. We'll kick that off next week, and then we should get through the First Amendment, I think, probably next week, and then jump into the second. So, questions? All right. Well, Renee, you're going to post the link for the post discussion.
Yes, I will.
I do work tomorrow, so it is going to be a quick night for me, but I will be there. So,
Okay.
all right. I will see you guys